Good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us on this Thursday afternoon. Thank you for choosing us and not the Cheltenham Festival. So before we begin, I've just got something that I need to make you aware of, and that is please be advised that this session will be recorded and the metadata will be collected. Recordings will be uploaded to our Pop Talk playlist, which is available on YouTube. The metadata is kept secure and used solely for the purposes of EPOP and HMPPS attendance reporting. If you don't wish to be visible on the video, that is absolutely fine. Just keep your camera turned off. Recording for this session will be stopped prior to the question and answer session, and the video will be edited prior to publishing on YouTube to ensure that no names are visible. Right, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. We've got Deborah with us, who is going to talk about breakfast clubs and how that has helped in her particular area in terms of engaging with people on probation. Just before I introduce Deborah, the whole kind of theme of these talks is to look at being creative, is to look at being positive, is to look at celebrating success, and doing that through communication, collaboration, and consistency. And what Deborah's going to talk about are some ideas that are a little bit outside the box. They're great for engaging with people. And she's going to tell us about some of the initiatives that she's involved in and how they've impacted on the people on probation that she's been working with. So good afternoon, Deborah. Are you okay?
Yes. Hello, Jamie. Good afternoon, everybody.
So would you want to, before we begin, Deborah, your role is an experiential advisor of part of the EPOP project for St Giles Wise. Can you just tell us a little bit about that role, please?
Yeah, so experiential advisors are typically people who've got lived experience. So I was in prison myself and came out on license. I had a 2-month license, and I was reporting to probation. And so during that time, in fact, I had 6 probation officers, which was a lot, but, you know, I managed to get through all of that. And I would say that I had actually a really good experience on probation, and I got through it. I was really happy. But the reason it really worked for me, I think, very well was I was able to actually contribute to other people's experience on probation as well. And one of the ways I did that was with breakfast clubs, which I will explain in more detail. But also within the EPOP experiential advisor sort of service, we actually are doing many things. We are actually doing some PQIP training for new officers. We're doing surveys and interviews with people on probation. So we might actually sit in the reception of a probation office and ask a set of questions. We've done that for Kent, Sussex and Surrey, but it's been done in other areas. I was involved with Kent, Sussex and Surrey on their surveys, so that we actually get feedback from the probationers there as to how their experience of probation was, what was working, what wasn't working, and what suggestions they had. And actually engaging with people on probation is always a very interesting and fruitful thing, and often you can help them a lot, you know, from your own personal experience. So it's very satisfying to be able to do that.
So
yeah,
just for those of you out there that are thinking, right, in terms of experiential advisors, they're people who've been through the system that can help and advise and work with probation practitioners on how to improve the service. So if any of you are interested, we've got around about 40 to 50 experiential advisors. And if you get in touch with your relationship managers, your EPOP managers, we can put you in touch with them, and you can use their experience for training days, for team meetings, for anything like that, to help and support people and engage people who are on probation now. So one of the initiatives that Deborah's been working on is something called a breakfast club. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about these breakfast clubs, Deborah?
Sure. Well, I mean, primarily I do work in the Kent, Sussex and Surrey area. And in fact, the Worthing Breakfast Club was actually one of the first that was set up and had been running, you know, for several years before I visited. And I thought, wow, this is a really good idea. And so people who were reporting to Worthing Probation Office, in fact, women, because that was a women-only breakfast club, but there are some mixed clubs, were actually reporting at the breakfast club rather than going into the office. And they had a lot of camaraderie between them, actually. It was fantastic because people on probation suddenly realized, wow, I'm not the only one. And also, they're not in an office, which is perhaps full of men who are triggering because of the crime or the situation they were in. And they get hot food, There are lots of support agencies at the Breakfast Club. Usually they vary from week to week, but it's also possible not just to see probation, but to see, for example, CGL worker or Forward Trust, or various other services and agencies that you need to see. So it can be a one-stop shop in terms of actually the services that you can meet in breakfast clubs. And typically they ask about 2 hours, and hot food is provided. But the help that you can get from other people on probation is very significant, often more than what probation can do, because often the type of issues that are really pressing in your life aren't things that probation can necessarily help with. Like I've done all sorts of things with people in terms of helping them to apply for jobs, writing disclosure letters. One lady, I helped her to get her Portuguese passport renewed, which was really important to her. She wanted to go and see her mum in Portugal. It varies so tremendously for what people need, but you're actually listening, and as an experiential advisor, I'm often signposting people to the service they need that they didn't know was just sitting literally 6 feet away, but didn't realize who that person was, or whatever, wherever the officer who can help them might be. So it's been a very fruitful and good time actually attending breakfast clubs.
It sounds like a great initiative, and obviously the difference being that you can engage with your probation practitioner in a different setting. You haven't got the stigma of having to go to a probation office, which if it's in your local area and you don't want to discuss everything that's gone on with people, can definitely help. You also mentioned as well the fact that you're around other people who are in a similar situation. So do you find that being part of these clubs helps people to meet other people in similar situations, helps them come out of their shell a little bit?
Yes, absolutely. It's a great social gathering. And so you get used to being with other people in an unthreatening sort of way. Often you make very good friends. I've got loads of good friends still from breakfast clubs. You might meet up for coffee or something. Or indeed, if they're having another situation, they might call you and say, oh, such and such has happened. What do I do? Or, something like that. So it does extend outside the club. There's no question at all. And obviously, having seen how the Worthing Club was working, I was really pushing for the Brighton Breakfast Club to be set up, and I helped to set that up. And there was another officer from the Brighton who was very keen to be involved in that as well. And in fact, in Kent, Sussex and Surrey, there have been 10 breakfast clubs. Sometimes they stop for a while or restart, but I think there are a lot of breakfast clubs in Kent, Sussex and Surrey. And when I was speaking about this last year, when we were doing some PQIP training in the southwest region for probation, there were some people in the audience who were very enthused and had been thinking about doing something like this. And in fact, I was invited to speak at the inaugural Bristol Women's Breakfast Club, which was a real, I was really happy about that, to go down there, and that was in January. Usually the club is in a venue like a church hall or a charitable premises, which is free. In fact, I think probation can get many local authority type premises free of charge if they're trying to arrange a breakfast club themselves. And if in fact you're thinking about doing something like this, we can actually help you to put the right contact in, because you do need some other volunteers and people to do cooking, or indeed we used to get the probationers to actually do quite a lot of the cooking, certainly.
Oh wow, so it's a bit of voluntary experience.
Yeah, so they're all helping out as well, so they feel engaged and involved. And so you'll find that a lot of people on probation actually really help to run the breakfast club as well, which is good. But it's nice to have other volunteers to chat with them, other people perhaps from the church or from suitable organizations, and all the agencies who are there really help. So it's really very positive.
So typically, they take place in a church hall or a venue that's usually being given for free. Because I think a lot of people will be thinking what a great idea it is, but then you've got to realistically look at it in terms of time constraints, in terms of funding. So if you're relying on volunteers, that's great. If you get in the venue for free, obviously that's great. And in terms of anything else, that from your experience, is there a typically low cost to this?
Well, there is. We're lucky in Brighton now, for example, that the church actually provides the food. Previously, we got the food from Morrison's, believe it or not. You just have to find a local provider who might help you. Or indeed, the probation office does actually sometimes contribute some monies towards food, because actually buying some breakfast may not be that much. It may be 10, 20, 30 pounds, depending on the numbers of people there. So, you know, particularly, it doesn't sound like that covers a lot, but you can actually feed quite a lot of people. You'd be surprised. So it's not a high cash outlay, usually speaking, and it's but you do need obviously people to help. You know, hands on deck. So yeah.
And typically for a probation practitioner, obviously it's a tough job. Time constraints are key. From your experience, is it a way of actually meeting a number of people in a shorter amount of time because you can engage with more people, everyone's in the same room, you can point to different services. So time wise, it might be a bit of an outlay to set up, but in terms of once everyone's there, it could perhaps save you time in the future.
Oh, I think it does. I mean, the results that I think are positive, you know, that people have a much better experience on probation when they've got breakfast clubs. There's no question. Both men and women say the same thing. Obviously, women can bring children along if they, you know, have got no other sort of childcare services to look after children. That they definitely are really happy. The first time they turn up, maybe they're a bit nervous, you know, but usually they really get into it very quickly. And although they may be reporting, say, just once a month, sometimes they just come every week because they enjoy it so much. It gives routine to their day. They get up, they get there early, they're involved, and it's all great, you know, and they've got friends that they're looking forward to seeing. And it's actually a very positive time for them. And some people actually stay on after their license, for example, I did. And a lot of people who say, and look, especially when probation ends, and they say, look, I still need some sort of someone to help me, they can still come to the Breakfast Club. There's no reason why they shouldn't. And we certainly don't stop them in, you know, places like Worthing or Brighton. It depends on the venue provider, but it should be fine, because people like to see how that person is progressing after probation, you know, and they also know they can still really get help there if they need to have it. So, and it really works for a number of reasons, you know, it's a support for many people.
It sounds like they're creating a community of support, people who are in similar situations. And you mentioned earlier that third-party service users are invited. Can you just give us an example of the sorts of people that come along?
Well, in fact, for example, as I mentioned, maybe, you know, the CGL worker will actually make the appointment for that person in the Breakfast Club. So, in fact, rather than, you know, having a separate appointment with, you know, services, they can actually have them in the club. There often is a private room that they can go away and chat or run a group or sort of do something like that. So the clubs are actually quite active in terms of there may be a craft table, there may be a group session. We've had clothes swap rails, you know, we've had manicures and manicures and facials, you know, a whole bunch of different things and activities that people can contribute to these things. And actually, recently, everyone in the Brighton Club I know was given a lovely hairbrush and a gold necklace for Mother's Day. I thought that was really nice. And that was actually done by St. Peter's Church. Very nice touch, because people really feel, in fact, one lady was saying, gosh, you know, I never got this from my job. And I was there for 34 years before, you know, I mean, like, to be treated like a real person, I think really makes a difference to the experience as well. And I can remember one of my dear friends now, she turned up in probation really scared when she first arrived. That was over 2 years ago now. And she's going, I just don't think I can make it through. I'm so scared about all of this, you know, and she had, like, you know, just an order. She had never even been in prison, but she was terrified about the whole process, basically. And we were saying, no, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. Just keep coming. You'll be fine. And like a couple of weeks ago, she'd actually finished her order, and she actually was thrilled that she'd finished, and like she'd got through. She was so scared she was going to be recalled. Never happened. And you know, she's had a lot of help and support and friendship all along the way. So that's actually probably, you know, and she was really happy with the whole thing. And there's many stories just exactly like that. So yeah.
Brilliant. It's just about being creative in terms of how you engage with people. And as you've said, you can draw people in as volunteers. You can create community support groups. You've got others that have got, you know, different interests and different skills that they can bring. You'd mentioned things like manicures and stuff, but ultimately it allows probation practitioners to engage with people on probation in a less formal setting where they can, you know, share a breakfast, share a coffee, they can have a chat, they can, you know, make plans, they can look at progress, and it's just a creative and kind of out of the box way of thinking, really. And for those of you that are watching, it might not be a breakfast club that you're thinking, but with this idea, can you be a little bit more creative? Can you think of something a little bit outside the box? Or do you want to create your own breakfast club? And if there are people, Deborah, out there that want to create their own in a different area, what
Yeah.
advice would you give them if they were thinking of doing this now?
Well, again, contact your EPOP manager, actually, because they can tap into those EPOP managers who know how these things run. And they can actually give you some contacts, say churches in your location that might have the church hall that can do it, or some venue provider maybe that can do it. So there's kind of a wealth of knowledge about how to do this, and also some procedures. I mean, for example, in Brighton, I mean, there's at least 2 or 3 probation officers who turn up every week. They have a rota, so you don't have to turn up every week. You can spread the load. Although the Women's League does tend to turn up pretty regularly, because when you've got like 10 or 15 women turning up, then it's actually a good idea to get to meet a lot of them. But there's help for you there if you are interested to do this and you think you've got enough kind of women reporting to actually justify doing something like this. So usually for the bigger offices, there's enough women. So I think it's absolutely worth it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great initiative, and it's another example of, within the probation service, there are some fantastic practitioners, there are some fantastic initiatives. And I think sometimes we don't shout loudly enough about what it is that we're doing. We don't celebrate enough that we're doing. We don't share the successes. And this is a nice, positive way of engaging people, of, allowing people to mix and benefit from being part of a community and realize they're not on their own. But it's also a good way of probation practitioners engaging with the people who they're working with and getting to know people. And again, if we can support in any way, shape or form, then please get in touch. If you want to get in touch with Deborah, if you want to get in touch with your relationship managers, there'll be people out there. And I think sharing best practice, particularly amongst different PDUs, different regions, is something that we'll really benefit from, because there are some brilliant things that go on. But if we can just get those a little bit more consistent and not just in little pockets, if we can share that around, then I think the service will only benefit. And going back to communication, collaboration, consistency, and how we drive this forward, those breakfast clubs allow communication between people who are on probation to share their stories, to look at their fears, to look at, progressing each other through. They allow communication between the practitioner and the person on probation. The collaboration aspect is something that comes together through inviting different people, in terms of, people on probation working together, perhaps on certain things, practitioners working together to get it up and running, to get it moving. And that consistency then is having a consistent approach to supporting people who are on probation, and how we engage with them. And, Debbie's mentioned it to do with females specifically, but it doesn't mean to say that there can't be a male group. It doesn't mean to say there can't be a mixed group. It's just thinking about creative ways of engaging people. And then once they're engaged, how do we move them forward? And again, you will have the answers to this between you, and it's about sharing those answers and trialing certain things. You might try something and it might not work. That's fine. Try something different. Evolve the idea in a certain way. But all of these ideas and all this sharing of practice will only benefit the service and the people who you work with.
And particularly, actually, it helps the services, believe it or not. I mean, where I was surprised when we did the Bristol inaugural meeting was that there were a lot of agencies there, maybe 20 people from different agencies, and they all introduced themselves. And in fact, we didn't have any probationers there on that first breakfast. And it was amazing how many of them had heard of the other agency but had never actually met anybody. And then it was also amazing that a lot of the things they were doing were like complementary, and actually they have the chance to meet each other as well in that kind of forum, which is actually a positive thing. And of course, actually the probation officers who attend these breakfast clubs really also appreciate being out of the office for, you know, a couple of hours for a bit of peace and quiet to actually deal with the people in front of them, you know, so that they also find that pretty therapeutic. I think I'll say, you know, it's like almost a key worker session, you know, sort of a session that's really good for them also. So, I mean, it's not just the probationers who benefit, it's actually the agencies and also the probation staff.
Well, it allows the agency to network a little bit and
Yeah,
see who's
with the
working in
officer
their
as well.
area.
Absolutely, because they can talk about other cases whilst they're there. You know, they'll say so and so didn't turn up on such and such a day or whatever it was, and they go, yeah, we'll follow that up. You see what I'm saying? Because often if you send an email, you never know if that's going to get answered or not. But if you can say X, Y, and Z happened or didn't happen, you can fix it. You know.
And face-to-face contact is always good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Always good. Well, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon, folks. It's been a pleasure. Hopefully we will see you all soon.